What if I told you that in the Middle Ages, some people believed the cure for insanity was eating human brains? Yes, you heard that right. Welcome to a time when science was ruled by superstition, when sickness of the mind was seen as a curse of punishment, or even possession, and when desperate healers turned to horrifying methods, cutting open skulls, removing imaginary stones of madness, and yes, consuming parts of the human body. This video will uncover the shocking medical practices once believed to cure madness, from brutal surgeries to bizarre rituals. You'll learn how fear and ignorance shaped the early treatment of mental illness. Some of these stories are rarely told. Some will make your skin crawl, but each one reveals something deeper about how far we've come and how little we once knew stayed with us until the end. Welcome to History Screen. Don't forget to subscribe. In medieval times, madness wasn't seen as a medical issue. It was something darker. People believed it came from evil spirits, punishment from God, or unbalanced forces inside the body. There were no brain scans or psychology. Instead, there were prayers, potions, and fear. One popular belief came from the theory of the four humors. According to ancient Greek medicine, the body contained four fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. If these were out of balance, people thought it could cause madness. A person with too much black bile, for example, might be melancholic, unstable, or seen as possessed. But there was a stranger idea too. Some believed that a small solid object grew inside the skull of the man, called the Stone of Madness. It was imagined as a dark lump that caused confusion, pain, and strange behavior. This idea became so widespread that people believed it could be removed through surgery. It sounds ridiculous today, but back then people were desperate. Mental illness was feared. There were no explanations, only legends. And when stories spread about patients being cured after an object was removed from their head, it only made the belief stronger. Fake healers or quack doctors used this to their advantage. They performed public surgeries, claiming to pull stones from their patients' skulls. Of course, the stones were often just pebbles or pieces of bone planted in advance. But the show impressed crowds and gave people hope. This bizarre belief even found its way into art. One of the most famous examples is a painting by the Dutch artist Hieronymus Bosch titled The Extraction of the Stone of Madness. It shows a man in a funnel hat being operated on by a doctor with a flower coming out of his head. Meant to mock the absurdity of the surgery around them, stand a nun and a monk, eyes blank, as if watching madness itself. The image was more than a joke. It was a warning, a message about how easily people could be fooled and how far fear could push society. If you lived in the Middle Ages and showed signs of madness, hearing voices, speaking nonsense, or behaving strangely, there was a chance someone might suggest cutting a hole in your skull. This practice was called trepanation. It wasn't new. Trepanation has been around since ancient times, long before medieval Europe. People believed that opening the skull could release pressure, evil spirits, or blocked energy. By the Middle Ages, it was being used as a supposed cure for everything from headaches to seizures. And of course, madness. The process was brutal. A sharp tool, often a crude drill or knife, was used to scrape or bore into the skull. No anesthesia, no sterile tools, just blood, pain, and faith. In some cases, this wasn't done for medical reasons. It was done to remove something people believed was causing the madness itself. The so-called Stone of Madness quack doctors, fake or untrained healers, would perform public surgeries in front of crowds. They claimed to pull out small stones from the patient's head. These were sometimes bits of bone, pebbles, or even carved objects hidden in their sleeves. It was all theater. The crowd would gasp. The patient, likely drugged or dazed, would lie still. The doctor would show the stone and declare the cure a success. There is no record of these procedures working, of course, but people believed what they saw. And when the stone couldn't be removed through surgery, other remedies followed. Some were just as horrifying in rare and extreme cases. It was believed that eating parts of the body, especially the brain, might restore mental balance. This idea likely came from the belief that consuming the organ of a healthy person could transfer strength or wisdom. Since the brain was thought to control thought and emotion, it made sense in their logic that eating it might heal madness, while direct records of brain eating as a madness cure are scarce, we do know that consuming human body parts was not uncommon in certain medical circles. Powdered skull, blood, fat, and even dry flesh were used to treat conditions like epilepsy, anxiety, or melancholy. The lines between science and superstition were thin and often crossed, and that's not all other. Cures range from the mildly strange to the outright dangerous doctors recommended. Drinking mercury, applying crushed emeralds to the forehead, or tying weasel testicles around the neck herbal mixtures were common, though their effects were hit or miss. Some were calming. Others caused hallucinations or sickness. Everything was trial and error. Mostly error still, people believed. They were desperate to explain what they didn't understand. And in that desperation, even the most bizarre remedy could sound like trepanation. Is one of the oldest known surgical practices in human history, long before medieval Europe, even as far back as the Neolithic era. People were cutting holes in the skulls. Archaeologists have found ancient skulls with round, deliberate openings, some even showing signs of healing, which means the person survived the procedure. Why did early humans do this? The reasons varied. Some believed it was a spiritual act meant to release evil spirits or negative energy. Others thought it relieved pain or pressure inside the head. There are also signs that it may have been used to treat head injuries from battle or accidents. In many cultures, it was a mix of spiritual beliefs and early medicine. By the time of the Middle Ages, trepanation had become more organized, but not necessarily safer. Medieval surgeons used it to treat a variety of problems, including seizures, skull fractures, severe headaches, and madness. They believed that pressure inside the skull could disturb the mind, and without any way to see inside the brain, the only solution they had was to open it up. The tools were simple but deadly. Surgeons used small hand drills, knives, and scraping tools made of iron or bronze. There was no understanding of germs or bacteria, and no real painkillers. Some patients were given alcohol or herbal sedatives, but nothing that could truly block the pain still. Not everyone died on the table. Some patients did survive. There are historical records and even skulls showing that people lived for months or years after the operation. In some cases, patients may have experienced relief from pressure caused by swelling, bleeding, or fluid buildup inside the skull. The short-term improvement may have seemed like proof that the treatment worked. Medieval doctors, however, didn't fully understand why the surgery helped some people. They relied on ancient texts, personal experience, and word of mouth. If someone calmed down after the operation, it was seen as a success. If the person died, it was often blamed on the illness being too strong or on demons that refused to leave. The logic may have been flawed, but the intention was real. These doctors believed they were helping in their world where science was limited and fear was powerful. Drilling a hole into the skull made more sense than doing nothing at all. In medieval Europe, not all responses to mental illness were violent or cruel. While many feared the mad and misunderstood their conditions, others saw them as people who needed help, care, or even spiritual healing. The church played a major role in this view. Monasteries often became places of care for the sick, including those with mental disorders. Monks and nuns were sometimes the closest thing to doctors in remote towns. They followed the teachings of compassion and charity. Many believed that mental illness was a burden of the soul, not just the body. Because of this, they offered prayer, shelter, and quiet surroundings, an early form of what we might call mental rest. In some areas, religious hospitals were established to care for the poor and the mentally disturbed. These institutions were not always kind by modern standards, but they were far more humane than the public surgeries performed by street doctors. Inside their stone walls, the focus was on healing through peace, prayer, and time. Pilgrimage was another common path to healing. People who suffered from madness or whose loved ones did traveled long distances to visit sacred sites. They sought healing from holy relics, objects said to carry divine power. A bone from a saint, a piece of cloth touched by a holy figure, or even drops of water from a blessed spring were believed to offer cures. These pilgrimages were acts of deep faith. Some people claimed miracles, others returned the same, but the effort itself often brought hope and comforting. Some towns' communities made room for those with mental conditions. There are records of certain festivals and public events where people with mental illness were not hidden, but included. In these moments, madness wasn't treated as something terrifying. It was accepted as part of life. Of course, this kindness stood in sharp contrast to the horror found elsewhere. While some were being sheltered in monasteries, others were being cut open by charlatans in the streets. While one person was guided toward healing through faith, another was fed dangerous potions or had stones removed from their skull by a traveling doctor with no training. This contrast reveals the divided nature of medieval society. On one side was compassion rooted in religious duty. On the other hand was fear driven by ignorance and spectacle. And in between stood the people watching, wondering, and hoping for a cure. The idea of removing something from the brain to cure madness did not disappear with the Middle Ages. In fact, it evolved. As science advanced, people no longer believed in literal stones inside the head, but the core belief that mental illness could be cut out remained strong. This belief followed medicine into the 19th and 20th centuries. As doctors searched for answers, many returned to the brain. They began performing new surgeries, now called psychosurgeries, to try and fix mental disorders. The methods were modern, but the thinking was still olden. The 1930s, a Portuguese doctor named Egas Manes introduced a new operation. It was called the prefrontal leucotomy. He believed that by cutting the connections between the front part of the brain and the rest, a patient's emotions could be controlled. He thought this would calm people with severe anxiety, depression, or schizophrenia. Manes' idea gained attention quickly. Hospitals in Europe and the United States began using the method. The name later changed to lobotomy, and it became one of the most controversial treatments in medical history. Thousands of patients underwent the procedure. Some were adults, others were children. A few did show reduced aggression or anxiety, but often at a terrible cost. Many patients lost their ability to think clearly. Others became emotionally flat, unable to feel joy or sadness. Some could no longer care for themselves. The operation damaged parts of the brain that control personality, memory, and reasoning. Still, for a time, lobotomy was praised as a miracle cure. It was only later that the true cost became clear. Critics compared the procedure to earlier medieval practices, primitive, misguided, and dangerous, like the fake removal of the stone of madness. Lobotomy was based on fear, not full understanding. Today, science sees mental illness differently. Researchers know that madness is not caused by a single object or broken part in the brain. It's a complex mix of biology, chemistry, and experience. Modern treatments focus on therapy, medication, and brain science, not knives and drills. But the shadow of the past still lingers. The old belief that madness can be cut away reminds us how deeply fear shapes medicine. And how long can it take to turn belief into true understanding? The medieval world was full of strange horrors. People believed madness came from spirits, curses, or even stones inside the brain. They drilled skulls, removed imagined objects, and turned to horrifying cures, including consuming parts of the human body. But behind these terrifying practices was something deeply human. Fear, hope, in the struggle to understand the unknown. Without science, people turned to whatever seemed to work. No matter how painful or bizarre, today we understand mental illness in ways our ancestors could never imagine. We have therapy, medicine, and brain research, yet medicine continues to evolve. What we know now may still change in the future, so the next time life feels overwhelming, remember, at least no one is suggesting we eat brains to feel better. If you found this story interesting, give this video a like and subscribe to History Screen for more strange, forgotten tales from the past. Thanks for watching.